Dun. Hey, Riley. Break over to the bookstore. We still have 2 minutes of ads to go, so. Okay, we just read it out. Okay. Yeah, so. Why do I still hear my music? It's just me. I don't know. But anyway, we're doing Sherlock Holmes again tonight. Probably going to get at least 4 chapters of Hound of the Baskervilles taken care of. At least that's what I'm shooting for. So hopefully I will get through all of those. I'm trying to keep an eye on the time so I don't have accidental ads interrupt. And since I won't be on next week, I want to make sure I do it tonight. I'm like working on 2 different streams right now. Oh. I do enjoy a good back scratching. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully we won't have ads again for another hour. I try to run ads just to get them out of the way. And I may run ads between chapters just to get them out of the system. Because honestly, I would rather have control over when the ads go than have them pop up at random. Which, you know, I'm sure is completely understandable. And just want to make sure everyone can hear everything. I'm still working on stuff in the background on other windows, so. Okay. Okay, so checking. Huh. Let's disable that Skyrim one. I don't need it on right now. I may not be able to use it at all because crap isn't working. My computer can't handle it. Okay, so it should be removed now. Dun, 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 dun. This. What do I have? I don't even know what this one is. Yeah. Hopefully I won't have near the scuff issues I had last night, but not playing games, so it should be completely fine. But again, I'm gonna be out of town next weekend because it's my grandmother's 93rd birthday. And I'm going to hotter weather against my better judgment because I want to be with family. Okay. Now, I usually don't start reading until 10 after, but I start the stream early just to get the ads out of the way. Yeah. Mm. Normally, I would advertise the books because there they are, they're books, and apparently there was a Kabuto. Yeah. But yeah, if anyone doesn't know me already, I'm a storyteller. I live and work in this bookstore. There's actually a coffee shop next door, but uh, I've got my own entrance over there. Yeah. Actually live in an apartment. Eventually, we'll release the floor plans, but I don't feel like it right now. Why is that thing still in my chat window? Which one? Chat window. Okay. But I'll go ahead and go to the study. Welcome in. We are again reading The Hound of the Baskervilles. We have made it all the way up through chapter 8 last week, so we're starting on chapter 9 today. Yeah, man. Why does the yawning not start until I start trying to stream? Really? It's bothersome. Can't stream on the edge of my seat. There we go. Try to get things situated a little bit more here. So I can see the controls better. So to be able to see the ad timer. Okay. It is. Yeah, damn. Yeah. 9 after, so not 9 after, 10 after. Oh, do not. My book was about to close on me. Anyway. The Hound of the Baskervilles, another adventure of Sherlock Holmes. Chapter 9. Second report of Dr. Watson. The light upon the moor. Baskerville Hall, October 15th. My dear Holmes, I was compelled to leave you without much news during the early days of my mission. You must acknowledge that I am making up for lost time, and the events are now crowding thick and fast upon us. In my last report, I ended upon my top note with Barrymore at the window, and now I have quite a budget already which will, unless I am much mistaken, considerably surprise you. Things have taken a turn which I could not have anticipated. In some way, they have, within the last 48 hours, become much clearer, and in some ways they have become more complicated. But I will tell you all, and you shall judge for yourself. Before breakfast, on the morning following my adventure, I went down the corridor to examine the room in which Barrymore had beat upon the night before. The western window through which he had stared so intently was, I noticed, one particularity above all other windows in the house. It commands the nearest outlook on the moor. There is an opening between two trees which enables one from this point to view and look right down upon it, while from the other windows it can only a distant glimpse to which can be obtained. It follows, therefore, that Barrymore, since only this window would have served his purpose, must have been looking out for something or somebody upon the moor. The night was very dark, so that I could hardly imagine how he could have hoped to see anyone. It had struck me that it was possible that some love intrigue was on foot. That would have been accounted for stealthy movements and also for the uneasiness of his wife. The man is a striking fellow, very well equipped to steal the heart of a country girl, so that this theory seems to have something of support it. That opening of the door, which I had heard after I had returned to my room, might mean that he had gone out to keep some clandestine appointment. So I reasoned with myself in the morning, and I tell you the direction of my suspicions, however much the result may have shown that they were unfounded. But whatever the true explanation of Barrymore's movements might be, I felt that the responsibility of keeping them to myself until I could explain them was more than I could bear. I had an interview with the baronet in the study after breakfast, and I told him all that I had seen. He was less surprised than I had expected. I knew that Barrymore walked about at nights, and I had a mind to speak to him about it. He said, 2 or 3 nights I have heard the steps of the passage coming and going, just about an hour you name. Perhaps then he pays a visit every night to that particular window, said I. Perhaps he does. If so, we should be able to shadow him and see what it is that he is after. I wonder what your friend Holmes would do if he were here. I believe that he would do exactly now what you suggest, I said, and he would follow Barrymore and see what he did. Then we shall do it together. But surely he will hear us. The man is deaf, and in any case we must take our chance of that. We'll sit up in my room tonight and wait until he passes. Sir Henry rubbed his hands with pleasure, and it was evident that he hailed the adventure as a relief to his somewhat quiet life upon the moor. The baronet has been in communication with the architect who prepared the plans for Sir Charles, and with the contractor from London, so that we may expect great changes to begin here soon. There have been decorators and furnitures up to Plymouth, and it is evident that our friend has large ideas, and means to spare no pains or expense to restore the grandeur of his family. When the house is renovated and refurnished, all that he will need will be a wife to make it complete. Between ourselves, there are pretty clear signs that this will not be wanting if the lady is willing, for I have seldom seen a man more infatuated with a woman than he is with our beautiful neighbor, Miss Stapleton. And yet the course of true love does not quite run as smoothly as one would under the circumstances expect. Today, for example, its surface was broken by a very unexpected ripple, which has caused our friend considerable perplexity and annoyance. After the conversation which I have quoted about Barrymore, Sir Henry put on his hat and prepared to go out. As a matter of course, I did the same. "What, are you coming, Watson?" he asked, looking at me in a curious way. "That depends on whether you're going to the moor," I said. "Yes, I am." "Well, you know what my instructions are, and I am sorry to interlude, but You heard how earnestly Holmes insisted that I should not leave you, and especially that you should not go alone upon the moor. Sir Henry put his hand upon my shoulder with a pleasant smile. My dear fellow, he said, Holmes, with all his wisdom, did not foresee some things to overtake him. No, did not foresee some things which have happened since I have been on the moor. You understand me. I am sure that you are the last man in the world who would wish to be a spoil sport. I must go out alone. It put me in an awkward position. I was at a loss what to say or what to do, and before I had made up my mind, he picked up his cane and was gone. But when I came to think of the matter over, my conscience reproached me bitterly for having, on any pretext, allowed him to go out of my sight. I imagined what my feelings would be if I had to return to you and to confess that some misfortune had occurred through my disregard for your instructions. I assure you that my cheeks flushed at the very thought. It might not even now be too late to overtake him, so I set off at once in the direction of Merripit House. Thank you. I hurried along the road at the top of my speed without seeing anything of Sir Henry, until I came to the point where the moor path branches off. There, fearing that perhaps I had come in the wrong direction, after all, I mounted the hill from which I could command a view, the same hill which is cut into the dark quarry. Thence I saw him at once. He was on the moor path about a quarter of a mile off, and a lady was by his side who could only be Miss Stapleton. It was clear that there was already an understanding between them, and that they had met by appointment. They were walking slowly along in deep conversation, and I saw her making quick little movements in her hands, as if she were saying some very earnest in what she was saying, while he listened intently, and once or twice shook his head in strong dissent. I stood among the rocks watching them, very much puzzled as to what I should do next. To follow them and break into their intimate conversation seemed to be an outrage, and yet my clear duty was never for an instant to let him out of my sight. To act the spy upon a friend was a hateful task. Still, I could see no better course than to observe him from the hill, and to clear my conscience by confessing to him afterwards what I had done. It is true that if any sudden danger had threatened him, I was too far away to be of any use, and yet I am sure that you will agree with me that the position was very difficult, and that there was nothing more which I could do. Our friend, Mr. Henry, and the lady had halted on the path and were standing deeply absorbed in their conversation, when I was suddenly aware that I was not the only witness to their interview. A wisp of green floating in the air caught my eye, and another glance showed me that it was carried on a stick by a man who was moving along the broken ground. It was Stapleton, with his butterfly net. He was very much closer to the pair than I was, and he approached to be moving in the same direction. At this instant Sir Henry suddenly drew Miss Stapleton to his side. His arms were around her, but it seemed to me that he was straining away from her with her face averted. He stooped his head to hers, and she raised one hand as if in protest. Next moment I saw them spring apart and turn hurriedly around. Stapleton was the cause of their interruption. He was running wildly towards him, his absurd net dangling behind him. He gesticulated and almost danced with excitement in front of the lovers. What the scene meant I could not imagine, but it seemed to me that Stapleton was abusing Sir Henry, who offered explanations, which became more angry as the other refused to accept them. The lady stood by in haughty silence. Finally Stapleton turned upon his heel and beckoned in a peremptory way to his sister, who, after an irresolute glance at Sir Henry, walked off by the side of her brother. The naturalist's angry gesture showed that the lady was included in his displeasure. The baronet stood for a moment long looking after them. Then he walked slowly back the way that he had come, his head hanging, the very picture of dejection. What all this meant I could not imagine, but I was deeply ashamed to have witnessed so intimate a scene without my friend's knowledge. I ran down the hill, therefore, and met the baronet at the bottom. His face was flushed with anger, and his brows were wrinkled, like one who was at his wits' end on what to do. "Hello, Watson. Where have you dropped from?" said he. "You didn't mean to say that you came after me in spite of it all." I explained everything to him, and how I had found it impossible to remain behind, how I had followed him, and how I had witnessed all that had occurred. For an instant his eyes blazed at me, but my frankness disarmed his anger, and he broke at last into a rather rueful laugh. "He would have thought the middle of the prairie a fairly safe place for a man to be in private," he said. "But by thunder, the whole countryside seems to have been out to sea with me and my wooing, and a mighty poor wooing at that." "Where had you engaged a seat?" "I was on that hill." "Quite in the back row, eh?" "But her brother was well up to the front. Did you see him come out on us?" "Yes, I did." "Did he ever strike you as being crazy, that brother of hers?"
"I can't say that he ever did."
"I dare say not. I always thought of him sane enough until today. But you can take it from me that either he or I ought to be in a straitjacket." "What's the matter with me, anyhow? You've lived near me for some weeks, Watson. Tell me straight now. Is there anything that prevent me from making a good husband to a woman that I loved?"
"I should say not."
"We can't object to my worldly positions, so it must be myself that he has his down on. What has he against me? I never hurt man or woman in my life that I know of, and yet he would not so much as let me touch the tips of her fingers."
"Did he say so?"
"Yeah, that and a deal more. I tell you, Watson, I've only known her these few weeks, but from the first I've just felt that she was made for me, and she, too, she was happy when she was with me, and that I'll swear. There's a light in a woman's eyes that speaks louder than words. But he has never let us get together, and it was only today for the first time that I had the chance of having a few words with her alone. She was glad to meet me, but when she did it, it was not love that she would talk about. And she wouldn't have let me talk about it either, if she could have stopped it. She kept coming back to it is that this place is a place of danger, and that she would never be happy until I had left it. I told her that since I had seen her, I was in no hurry to leave it, and if she really wanted me to go, the only way to work it was for her to arrange to go with me. With that, I offered her as many words to marry her. But before she could answer, down came this brother of hers, running at us with a face on him like a madman. He was just white with rage, and those light eyes of his were blazing with fury. What was I doing with the lady? How dared I offer her attentions which were distasteful to her? How did I think that because I was a baronet I could do what I liked? If he had not been her brother, I would have shown him better how to answer them. As it was, I told him that my feelings towards his sister were such as I was not ashamed of, and that I hoped that she would honor me by becoming my wife. That seemed to make the matter no better. So then I lost my temper too, and I answered them rather more hotly than I should have, perhaps, considering that she was standing by. So it ended with his going off with her, as you saw, and here am I, as badly puzzled as a man as any in this county. Just tell me what it means, Watson, and I'll owe you more than ever I can hope to pay. I tried one or two explanations, but indeed I was completely puzzled myself. Our friend's title, his fortune, his age, his character, and his appearance are all in favor, and I know nothing against him, unless it be his dark fate which runs in his family. That his advances should be rejected so brusquely without any reference to the lady's own wishes, and that the lady should accept the situation without protest, is very amazing. However, our conjectures were set at rest by a visit of Stapleton himself that very afternoon. He had come to offer apologies for his rudeness of the morning, and after a long private interview with Sir Henry in his private study, the upshot of their conversation was that the breach is quite healed, and that we are to dine at Merripit House next Friday as a sign of it. I don't say now that he isn't a crazy man, said Sir Henry. I can't forget the look in his eyes when he ran at me this morning, but I must allow that no man could make a more handsome apology than he has done. Did he give any explanation of his conduct? His sister is everything in his life, he says. That is natural enough, and I am glad that he should understand her value. They have always been together, and according to his account, he has been a very lonely man, with her as his only companion. So the thought of him losing her was really terrible to him. He had not understood, he said, that I was becoming attached to her. But when he saw with his own eyes that it really was so, and that she might be taken away from him, it gave him such a shock, and for a time he was not responsible for what he said or did. He was very sorry for all that had passed, and he recognized how foolish and how selfish it was that he should imagine that he could hold a beautiful woman like his sister to himself for her whole life. If she had to leave him, he'd rather it be to his neighbor like myself than to anyone else. But in any case, it was a blow to him, and it would take him some time before he could prepare himself to meet it. He would withdraw all opposition upon his part if I would promise for 3 months to let the matter rest, and to be content with cultivating the lady's friendship during that time without claiming her love. This I promised, and so the matter rests. So there is one of the small mysteries cleared up. It is sometimes to have touched bottom anywhere in this bog in which we are all floundering. We know why Stapleton looked with disfavor upon his sister's suitor, even when that suitor was so eligible a one as Sir Henry. And now I have to pass another thread which I have extracted out from this tangled skein. The mystery of the sobs in the night, of the terrible stained face of Mrs. Brereton, of the secret journey of the butler to the western lattice window. Congratulate me, my dear Holmes, and tell me that I have not disappointed you in an ancient, that you do not regret the confidence which you showed me when you sent me out down here alone. All these things have by one night's work been roughly cleared. I have said by one night's work, but in truth it was by 2 nights' work, for on one first we drew entirely blank. I sat up with Sir Henry in the room until nearly 3 o'clock in the morning, but no sound of any sort did we hear except the chiming clock upon the stairs. It was a most melancholy vigil, and ended by each of us falling asleep in our chairs. However, we were not discouraged, and we determined to try again. The next night we lowered the lamp, and we sat smoking cigarettes without making the least sound. It was incredible how slowly the hours crawled by, and yet we were helped through by the same sort of patient interest which the hunter must feel as he watches a trap into which he hopes the game may wander. 1 struck, and 2, and we had almost for the second time given up in despair, when in an instant we both sat bolt upright in our chairs, with all the weary senses keenly on the alert once more. We had heard the creak of a step in the passage. Very stealthily we heard it pass along until it had died away in the distance. Then the baronet greatly opened the door, and we set out in a pursuit. Already our man had gone round the gallery and into the corridor that was in darkness. Softly we stole along until we had come to the other wing. We were just in time to catch a glimpse of the tall, black-bearded figure, his shoulders rounded as he stood tiptoed down the passage. Then he passed through the same door as before, and the light of the candle framed it in the darkness, and shot one single yellow beam across the gloom of the corridor. We shuffled cautiously towards it, trying every plank before we dared to put our whole weight upon it. We had taken the precaution of leaving our boots behind us, but even so the old boards snapped and creaked beneath our tread. Sometimes it seemed impossible that he should fail to hear our approach. However, the man was fortunately rather deaf, and he was entirely preoccupied in what he was doing. When at last he reached the door and peeped through, we found him crouched at the window, candle in hand, his white, intent face pressed against the pane, exactly as I had seen him 2 nights prior. We had arranged no plan of campaign, but the baronet is a man whom the most direct way was always the most natural. He walked into the room, and as he did so, Barrymore sprang up from the window with a sharp hiss of his breath, and stood, livid and trembling, before us. His dark eyes, glaring at the white mask of his face, were full of horror and astonishment as he glanced from Sir Henry to me. "What are you doing here, Barrymore?" "Nothing, sir." His agitation was so great that he could hardly speak, and the shadows sprang up and down from the shaking of the candle. "It was the window, sir. I go round at night to see what they've fastened." On the second floor?" "Yes, sir, the windows." "Look here, Barrymore," said Sir Henry sternly. "We have made up our minds to have the truth out of you, so it will save you trouble to tell it sooner rather than later. Come now, no lies. What were you doing at that window?" The fellow looked at us in a helpless way, and he wrung his hands together like one who was in the last extremity of doubt and misery. "I was doing no harm, sir. I was holding the candle to the window." "And why were you holding the candle to the window?" Don't ask me, Sir Henry, don't ask me. I give you my word, sir, that it is not my secret, and that I cannot tell it. If it concerned no one but myself, I would not try to keep it from you.
A sudden idea occurred to me, and I took the candle from the windowsill, where the butler had placed it. It must have been holding it as a signal, I said. Let us see if there is an answer. I held it as he had done, then stared out into the darkness of the night. Vaguely, I could discern the black bank of the trees and the lighter expanse of the moor, for the moor was behind the for the moon was behind the clouds. And then I gave a cry of exultation, for a tiny pinpoint of yellow light had suddenly transfixed in the dark, and slowly glowed steadily in the center of the black square, framed by the window. "There it is!" I cried.
No, no, sir, it's nothing at all, the butler broke in. I assure you, sir.
"Move your light across the window, Watson," cried the baronet. "See if the other moves also."
Now, you rascal, do you deny that it is a signal? Come, speak up. What is your confederate out there on to? What is this conspiracy to do going on?
The man's face became openly defiant.
It is my business, and not yours. I will not tell. Then you will leave my employment right away.
Very good, sir. If I must, I must.
And you go in disgrace, by thunder. You may as well be ashamed of yourself. Your family has lived with mine for over 100 years under this roof, and here I find you deep in some dark plot against me.
No, no, sir, not against you.
It was a woman's voice, Mrs. Barrymore.
Paler and more horror-struck than her husband, was standing at the door. Her bulky figure in a shawl and skirt might have been comic, were it not for the intensity of feeling upon her face.
You have to go, Lisa. This is the end of it. You can pack your things, said the butler.
Oh, John, have I brought you to this? This is my doing, Sir Henry. All mine. He has done nothing except for my sake, and because I asked him.
Speak out, then. What does it mean?
My unhappy brother is starving out on the moor. We cannot let him perish at our very gates. The light is a signal for him that food is ready for him, and his light out yonder is to show the spot in which to bring it.
Then your brother is?
The escaped convict, sir. Selden, the criminal.
That's the truth, sir, said Barrymore. I said it was not my secret, and that I could not tell it to you. But now you have heard it, and you will see that there was no plot, and there was none against you.
This, then, was their explanation to the stealthy expeditions at night, and the light at the window. Sir Henry and I both stared at the woman in amazement. It was possible that this stolidly respectable person was of the same blood as one of the most notorious criminals in the country.
Yes, sir. My name is Sheldon, and he is my younger brother. We humored him too much when he had his lad, and gave him to on his way everything until he came to think that the world was made for his pleasure, and that he could do what he liked with it. Then, as he grew older, He met wicked companions, and the devil entered into him until he broke my mother's heart and dragged our name into the dirt. From crime to crime, we sank lower and lower, until it was only the mercy of God which snatched him from the scaffold. But to me, sir, he was always the little curly-haired boy that I had nursed and played with as an elder sister would. That was why he broke prison, sir. He knew that I was here and that we could not refuse to help him. When he dragged himself here one night, weary and starving, with the warders hard at his heels, what could we do? We took him in and fed him and cared for him. Then you returned, sir, and my brother thought he would be safer in the moor than anywhere else, until the hue and cry was over. So he lay hiding there. But every second night we made sure that he was still there by putting a light in the window. And if there was an answer, my husband took out some bread and meat to him. Every day we hoped that he was gone, but as long as he was there we could not desert him. That was the whole truth, and as I'm an honest Christian woman, and you will see that there's to blame, the matter does not lie with my husband, but with me, for whose sake he has done all that he has.
The woman's words came with an intense earnestness, which carried conviction in them. Is this true, Barrymore?
Yes, sir, Henry, every word.
Well, I cannot blame you for standing by with your own wife. Forget what I've said. Go to your room, you two, and we shall talk further about this matter in the morning. When they were gone, we looked out the window again. Sir Henry had flung it open, and the cold night wind beat in upon our faces. Far away in the black distance, there still glowed that one tiny point of yellow light.
I wonder he dares, said Sir Henry.
It may be so placed as to be only visible from here.
Very likely. How far do you think it is?
Out by the cleft tor, I think.
Not more than a mile or two off.
Hardly that.
Oh, it cannot be far if Barrymore would carry out food to it. And he is waiting, this villain, beside that candle.
By thunder, Watson, I'm going out to take that man. The same thought had crossed my own mind. It was not as if the Barrymores had taken us into their confidence. Their secret had been forced from them. The man was a danger to the community, and unmitigatedly scoundrel, from whom there was neither pity nor excuse. We were only doing our duty in taking a chance of putting him back where he could do no harm. With its brutal and violent nature, others would have to pay the price if we held our hands. One night, for example, our neighbors, the Stapletons, might have been attacked by him, and it may have been the thought of which made Sir Henry so keen on the adventure. "I will come," said I.
"Then the revolver, and put on your boots. The sooner we start, the better. And the fellow may put out his light and be off."
In 5 minutes we were outside the door, starting upon our expedition. We hurried through the dark shrubbery amid the dull moaning of the autumn wind and the rustle of the falling leaves. The night air was heavy with the smell of damp and decay. Now and again the moon peeped out for an instant, but the clouds were driving over the face of the sky. And just as we came out of the moor, the thin man began to fall. The light still burned steadily in front. "Are you armed?" I said.
I have a hunting crop.
"We must close on him rapidly, for he is a fellow to be said desperate.
I shall take him by surprise and have him at our mercy before he can resist."
I say, Watson, said the baronet, what would Holmes say to this? How about that hour of darkness in which the power of evil is exalted? As if in answer to his words, there rose suddenly out of the vast gloom of the moor a strange cry, which I had already heard upon the borders of the great Grimpet mine. It came with the wind through the silence of the night, a long, deep mutter, then a rising howl, and then the sad moan in which it died away. Again and again it sounded. The whole air throbbed with it, strident, wild, and menacing. The baronet caught my sleeve, and his face glimmered white through the darkness. Good heavens, what was that, Watson? I don't know. It's a sound they have on the moor. I've heard it once before. It died away, and an absolute silence closed in our arms. We stood straining our ears, but nothing came. Watson, said the baronet, it was the cry of a hound. My blood ran cold in my veins, for there was a break in his voice which told me the sudden horror which had seized it. What do they call this sound? He asked. Who? The men of the countryside. Oh, they're arrogant people. Why should you mind what they call it? Tell me, Watson, what do they say of it? I hesitated, but I could not escape the question. They say it's his cry of the Hound of the Baskervilles. He groaned and was silent for a few moments. The hound it was, he said at last, but it seemed to come from miles away. Over yonder, I think. It's hard to say from whence it came. It rose and fell with the wind. Isn't that the direction of the great Grimpet mire? Yes, it is. Well, it was up there. Come now, Watson. Didn't you think yourself that it was the cry of the hound? I am not a child. You need not to fear to speak the truth. Stapleton was with me when I heard it last. He said it might be the calling of a strange bird. No, it was a hound. My God, can be there some truth in these stories? Is it possible that I'm really in danger from so dark a cause? You don't believe it, do you, Watson? No. And yet, it was one thing to laugh about in London, and it is another to stand out in the darkness of the moor and to hear such a cry as that. And my uncle, there was a footprint in the helmet of the hound beside him as he lay. It all fits together. I don't think I am a coward, Watson, but that sound seemed to freeze my very blood. Feel my hand. It was as cold as a block of marble. You'll be all right tomorrow. I don't think I'll get that cry out of my head. What do you advise we do, Watson? Shall we turn back? No, by thunder, we have come out here to get our man, and we will do it. We're after the convict, and a hellhound, as likely as not, after us. Come on. We'll see it through. All the fiends of the pit were loose upon the moor. We stumbled slowly along in the darkness, with the black loom of the craggy hills around us, and the yellow speck of light burning steadily in front. There is nothing so deceptive as the distance of a light upon a pitch-black night, and sometimes the glimmer seems to be far away upon the horizon, and sometimes it might be within a few yards of us.
But at last, when we could see whence it came, and then we knew that we were indeed very close. The guttering candle was stuck in a crevice of the rocks, which flanked on Cash's side to keep the wind from it. Also, to prevent it from being visible, save for the direction of the Baskerville Hall. A boulder of granite concealed our approach, and crouching behind it, we gazed over at it, the signal light. It was strange to see the single candle burning in the middle of the moor, with no sign of life near it. Just the one single yellow flame, and the gleaming of the rock on each side of it. "What shall we do now?" whispered Sir Henry. "Wait here. We must be near his light. Let us see if we can get a glimpse of him." The words had hardly been out of my mouth when we both saw him. Over the rocks in the crevice of which the handle burned, there was thrust an evil yellow face, a terrible animal face, all seamed and scored with vile passions, foul with mire and a bristling beard and hung with matted hair. It might have belonged to one of those old savages who dwelt in the barrows on the hillsides. The light beneath him was reflected into his small, cunning eyes, which pierced fiercely to the right and left through the darkness, like a crafty and strange animal who had heard the steps of hunters. Something had evidently aroused his suspicions. It might have been that Barrymore had some private signal which he had neglected to give, or the fellow may have had some other reason for thinking that all was not well. But I could read the fear upon his wicked face. Any instant he might dash out of the light and vanish into the darkness. I sprang forward, therefore, and Sir Henry did the same. At the moment, the convict screamed out a curse at us and hurled a rock which splintered against the shoulder which had sheltered us. I caught one glimpse of his short, squat, strongly built figure as he sprang to his feet and turned to run. At the same moment, by lucky chance, the moon broke through the clouds. We rushed over to the brow of the hill, and there was our man, running with great speed down the other side, springing over stones in his way with the activity of a mountain goat. A lucky long shot with my revolver might have crippled him, but I had brought it only to defend myself if attacked, and not to shoot an unarmed man who was getting away. We were both fair runners and in a good condition, but we soon found that we had no chance of overtaking him. We saw him for a long time in the moonlight until he was only a small speck moving swiftly among the boulders upon the side of the distant hill. We ran and ran until we were completely blown, but the space between us grew ever wider. Finally we stopped and sat panting on two rocks while we watched him in the distance disappearing. It was at this moment that there occurred a strange and unexpected thing. We had risen from our rocks and turning to go home, having abandoned the hopeless chase. The moon was now low upon the right, and the jagged pinnacle of the granite tor stood up between the lower curve of the silver disk. There, outlined as black as an ebony statue on that shining black ground, I saw the figure of a man upon the moor. Do not think that it was a delusion, Holmes. I assure you that I have never in my life seen anything so clearly. As far as I could judge, the figure was that of a tall, thin man. He stood with his legs a little separated, his arms folded, his head bowed, and as if he were brooding over that enormous wilderness of peat and granite which lay before him. He might have been the very spirit of the terrible place. It was not the convict. This man was far from the place where the latter had disappeared. Besides, he was a much taller man. With a cry of surprise, I pointed at him with the bayonet, but the instant which I had turned to grasp his arm, the man was gone. There was a sharp pinnacle of granite still cutting the lower edge of the moon, but its peak bore no trace of that silent and motionless figure. I wished to go in that direction to search for the tor, but it was some distance away. The baronet's nerves were still quivering from that cry, which recalled the dark story of his family, and he was not in the mood for fresh adventures. He had not only seen the lonely man upon the tour, and could not feel the thrill of his strange presence, and his commanding attitude of given to me. "A warder, no doubt," he said. "The moor has been thick with them since the foe escaped." "Well, perhaps his explanation may be the right one, but I should like to have some further proof of it. Today we mean to communicate with the Princeton people where they should look for the missing man, and it is a hard lines that we have not actually had the triumph of bringing him back as our own prisoner. Such is the adventures of last night, and you must acknowledge, my dear Holmes, that I have done you very well in matter of a report. Much of what I tell you is no doubt quite irrelevant, but I still feel that it is best that I should let you have all the facts and leave you to select your own for yourself those which will be the most service to you in helping you with your conclusions. We are certainly making some progress. So far, Barrymore has gone the way we found the motives of their actions, and that has cleared up the situation very much. But the moor with its mysteries and strange inhabitants remains as inscrutable as ever. Perhaps in my next I may be able to throw some light upon this also. Best of all, it would be if you could come down to us. To be continued. Ah, that was a long chapter. And I can only hope I made it to the end before the commercial started running. I apologize if you didn't, but... Ow. I could not speed up without stumbling. Oh, man. That chapter was a lot longer than I expected. Oh, it was 50 some odd minutes. It's 9:59 and I started a little after 9:10. Watson's reports are a little bit longer than the regular chapters, apparently. Oh. And I had to change sitting positions, which is why I might have vanished from camera a bit. Oh. I need a break after that one. So that chapter was well over 2 of the previous chapters. Yes, thank you for the hydrate. Oh. And the stretch. Oh. That one really was a lot longer than I'm used to. I didn't even see if the chapters, I didn't even see if the commercials came up. I know the pre-roll off timer restarted itself, so they had to have come up. It's not giving me the option to run more ads.
So I'm guessing they went off.
Ugh.
I really hope that Watson's spotting of the stranger on the moor that Baskerville did not see. I don't know. All that excitement at the end of the chapter. I may not get 4 chapters done tonight at this rate. Okay. How many pages was that chapter? Okay, that went from page 239 to 249. That was only 10 pages. Mind you, it's double column 2 pages, so. Oh, there was a flabebe. I don't know what a flabebe is. Flambe! Oh. Chapter 10 is a lot shorter. Chapter 10. Extract from the Diary of Dr. Watson. So far, I've been able to quote from the reports which I have forwarded during these early days to Sherlock Holmes. Now, however, I have arrived at the point which my narrative, or I am compelled to abandon this method and to trust more one of my recollections, aided by the diary which I kept at the time. A few extracts from the latter will carry me to those scenes which are indelibly fixed from every detail upon my memory. I proceed then from the morning which followed our abortive chase of the convicts and our other strange experiences upon the moor. October 16th. A dull and foggy day with a drizzle of rain. The house is banked with rolling clouds, which rise now and then to show the dreary curves of the moor, with thin silver veins upon the sides of the hills, and the distant boulders gleaming where the light strikes upon their wet faces. It is a melancholy outside, and in. The baronet is in black reaction to the excitements of the night. I am conscious myself as of the weight at my heart and the feeling of impending danger, ever-present danger, which is the more terrible because I am unable to define it. And I have not cause for such feelings. Consider the long sequence of incidents which have been pointed out in some sinister influence which is at work around us. There is the death that is the last occupant of the hall, fulfilling so exactly the conditions of the family legend. And there is the repeated reports from peasants of the appearance of the strange creature upon the moor. Twice I have seen with my own eyes and ears the sound which resembled that of the distant baying of a hound. It is incredible, impossible that it really should be outside the ordinary laws of nature.
A spectral hound which leaves material footprints and fills the air with its howling is surely not to be thought of. Stapleton may fall in with such superstition, and Mortimer also. But if I have one quality upon earth, it is a common sense that nothing will persuade me to believe of such a thing. To do so would be to descend into the level of these poor peasants who are not content with a mere fiend dog, but must needs describe him with hellfire shooting out of his mouth and eyes. Holmes would not listen to such fancies, and I am in his agent. But facts are facts, and I have twice heard this crying upon the moor. Suppose that there's some really huge hound loose upon it. That would go far to explain everything. But where could such a hound lie concealed? And where did it get its food? Where did it come from? And how was it that no one saw it by day? It must be confessed that the natural explanation offers almost as many difficulties as the other. And always apart from the hound, there was the fact that the human agency in London, the man in the cab, and the letter which warned Sir Henry against the moor. This at least was real, but it might have been the work of a protesting friend as easily as an enemy. Where was that friend or enemy now? Had he remained in London, or had he followed us down here? Could he, or could he be the stranger whom I had seen upon the tour? It is true that I have had only one glance at him, and yet there are some things to which I am ready to swear. He is no one whom I have seen down here, and I have now met all the neighbours. The figure was far taller than that of Stapleton, far thinner than that of Frankland. Barrymore is more possibly have been, but we had left him behind us, and I am certain that he could not have followed us. A stranger, then, is still dodging us, and that stranger has dodged us from London. We have never shaken him off. If I could lay my hands upon that man, then at last we might have ourselves at the end of all our difficulties. To this one purpose I must now devote all my energies. My first impulse was to tell Sir Henry of my plans. My second and wisest one is to play my own game, and speak as little as possible to anyone. He is silent and distraught. His nerves have been strangely shaken by that sound upon the moor. I will say nothing to add to his anxieties, but I will take my own steps to attain my own end. We had a small scene this morning after breakfast. Barrymore asked leave to speak to Sir Henry, and they were closeted in his study for some little time. Speaking in the billiard-room, I more than once heard the sound of voices raised, and I had a pretty good idea of what the point was which was under discussion. After a time, the baronet opened his door and called for me. Barrymore considers that he has a grievance, he said. He thinks that it was unfair on our part to hunt his brother-in-law down when he, of his own free will, had told us his secrets. The butler was standing, very pale but very collected, before us. I have spoken too warmly, sir, he said, and if I am sure to beg your pardon, at the same time I was very much surprised when I heard you two gentlemen come back this morning, and learned that you had been chasing Selden. The poor fellow has enough to fight against without my putting more upon his neck.
If you had told us that your free will advantage of it, Sir Henry, indeed, I didn't. The man is a public danger. There are lonely houses scattered over the moor, and he's the fellow who would stick to nothing. You only want to get a glimpse of the face to see that. Look at Mr. Stapleton's house, for example, with no one but himself to defend it. There's no safety for anyone until he is under lock and key. He'll break into no house, sir. I gave you my solemn word upon that. But he will never trouble anyone in this country again. I assure you, Sir Henry, that in a very few days the necessary arrangements will have been made, and he will be on his way to South America. For God's sake, sir, I beg you not to let the police know what he is still in the moor. They have given up on the chase there, and he can lie quiet until the ship is ready for him. You can't tell on him without getting my wife and me into trouble. I beg you, sir, not to say anything to the police. What do you say, Watson? I shrugged my shoulders. If we were safely out of the country, it would be a relief to the taxpayer of a burden. But how about the chance of us holding someone up before he goes? He would not do anything so mad, sir. We have provided him with all that he can want. To commit a crime would be to show that he was hiding. That is true, said Sir Henry. Well, Barrymore? God bless you, sir, and thank you from my heart. It would have killed my poor wife to have him been taken again. I guess you're against my aiding and abetting a felon, Watson. But after what we have heard, I don't feel I could give that man up. And there's an end to it. All right, Barrymore, you can go. With a few broken words of gratitude, the man turned, but he hesitated and then came back. You've been very kind to us, sir, that I should like to do the best I can for you in return. I know something, Sir Henry, and perhaps I should have said it before, but it was long after the inquest that I found it out. I've never breathed a word about it yet to mortal man. It's about poor Sir Charles's death. The baronet and I were both upon our feet. Do you know how he died? No, sir, I don't know that. What then? I know why he was at the gates that hour. It was to meet a woman. To meet a woman? He? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And the woman's name? I can't give you the name, sir, but I can give you the initials. Her initials were LL. How do you know this, Barrymore? Well, Sir Henry, your uncle had a letter that morning. He had usually a great many letters, for he was a public man and well known for his kind heart, so that everyone who was in trouble was glad to turn to him. But that morning it had chanced there was only this one letter, and I took the more notice of it. It was from Comby Tracy, and it was addressed in a woman's hand. Well? Well, sir, I thought no more than the matter, and never would have done it again had it not been for my wife. Only a few weeks ago she was cleaning out Sir Charles's study, and it had never been touched since his death. And she found the ashes of it burned letter in the back of the grate. The greater part of it was charred to pieces, but one little slip, and the edge of the page hung together, and the writing could be still read, though it was grey in the background.
There seemed to us to be a postscript at the end of the letter, and it said, Please, please, as you are a gentleman, burn this letter and be at the gate by 10 o'clock. Beneath it was signed the letters LL. Have you got that slip? No, sir, I crumbled it to bits after we moved it. Has Sir Charles received any other letter in the same writing? Well, sir, I took no particular notice of his other letters. I should not have noticed them, only the one that happened to come along. And you have no idea who this LL is. No, sir, no more than you have. But I expect if we lay our hands upon the lady, we should know more about Sir Charles's death. I cannot understand, Barrymore, how you came to conceal this important information. Well, sir, it was immediately after our own trouble came to us. And then again, sir, we were both very fond of Sir Charles, and as we, well, might be considering all that he has done for us. To take this up couldn't help our poor master, and it's well to go carefully when there's a lady in the case. Even the best of us. He thought it might ruin his reputation. Well, sir, I thought no good could come of it. But now you have been kind to us, and I feel as if it would be treating you unfairly to not tell you all that I know about the matter. Very good, Barrymore. You can go. When the butler had left us, Sir Henry turned to me. Well, Watson, what do you think of this new light? Seems to leave the darkness rather blacker than before. So I think. But if we can only trace LL, it should clear up the whole business. We've gained that much. We know that there's someone who has the facts. We can only find her. What do you think we should do? Let Holmes know all about it at once. It will give him the clue for which he has been seeking. I am much mistaken if it does not bring him down. I at once went to my room and drew up my report of the morning's conversation for Holmes. It was evident to me that he had been very busy of late, for the notes in which I had been sending to Baker Street were few and short, with no comments upon the information which I had supplied, and hardly any confidence to my mission. No doubt his blackmailing case is absorbing his faculties, and yet this new factor must surely arrest his attention and renew his interest. I wish that he were here. October 17th. All day today the rain poured down, rustling on the ivy and dripping on the eaves. I thought of the convict out upon the bleak, cold, shelterless moor. Poor fellow. Whatever his crimes, he has suffered something to atone for them. And then I thought of the other one, the face in the cab, the figure against the moon. Was he also out in that deluge, the unseen watcher, the man of darkness? In the evening I put on my waterproof, and I walked out upon the sodden moor, full of dark imaginings.
the rain beating upon my face and the wind whistling about my ears. God help those who wander into the great mire now, for even the firm uplands are becoming a morass. I found the black tor upon which I had seen the solitary watcher, and from its craggy summits I looked out myself upon the melancholy downs. Rain squalls drifted across the russet's face, and the heavy, slate-colored clouds hung low over the landscape, trailing in grey wreaths down the sides of the fantastic hills. In the distant hollow on the left, half hidden by the mist, the two thin towers of Baskerville Hall rose above the trees. There were only the signs of human life which I could see, save for the prehistoric huts which lay thickly upon the slopes of the hills. Nowhere was there any trace of that lonely man whom I had seen on the same spot 2 nights before. As I walked back, I was overtaken by Dr. Mortimer driving in his dog cart over a rough moorland track, which led from the outlying farmhouse of Falmouth. He has been very attentive to us, and hardly a day has passed since he has not called at the house to see how we were getting on. He insisted upon my climbing into his dog cart, and he gave me a ride home. I found him much troubled over the disappearance of his little spaniel. It had wandered into the moor and had never come back. I gave him such consolation as I might, but I thought of the pony on the Gripen mire, and do not fancy that he will see his little dog again. By the way, Mortimer, I said, as we jolted along the rough road, I suppose there's some people living within the driving distance of this whom you do not know? Hardly any, I think. Can you, then, tell me the name of any woman whose initials are L.L.? He thought for a few moments. No, he said. There are only a few gypsies and labouring folk for whom I can answer. But among the farmers and gentry there are none who have those initials. Wait a bit, though. He added after a pause. There is Laura Lyons. Her initials are L.L., but she lives in Coombe Tracey. Who is she? I asked. She is Franklin's daughter. What? Old Franklin, that crank? Exactly. She married an artist named Lyons, who came sketching on the moor. He provided to be a blackguard and deserted her. The fault, from what I hear, may not have been entirely on one side. Her father refused to have anything to do with her because she had married without his consent, and perhaps for 1 or 2 other reasons as well. So between the old sinner and the young girl, the girl had a pretty bad time. How does she live? I fancy old Franklin allows her a pittance, but it cannot be more. Her own affairs are considerably involved. Whatever she may have deserved, one could not allow her to go hopelessly to the bad. Her story got about, and several of the people here did something to enable her to earn an honest living. Stapleton for one, and Sir Charles for another. I gave a trifle myself. It was to set her up in the typewriter business. He wanted to know about the object of my inquiries, but I managed to satisfy his curiosity without telling him too much, for there is no reason why we should take anyone into our confidence. Tomorrow morning I shall find my way to Coombe Tracey, and if I can see Mrs. Laura Lyons, of equal reputation, a long step will have been made forwards, clearing one incident in this chain of mysteries. I am certainly developing the wisdom of the serpent, for when Mortimer pressed his questions to an inconvenient extent, I asked him to casually at what type Franklin's skull belonged, and so heard nothing of but craniology for the rest of our drive. I have not lived for years with Sherlock Holmes for nothing.
I've only one other incident to record upon this tempestuous and melancholy day. This was my conversation with Barrymore just now, which gives me one more strong card which I can play in due time. Mortimer had stayed to dinner, and he and the baronet played écarté afterwards. The butler brought me in some coffee into the library, and I took a chance to ask him a few questions. "Well," said I, "has this precarious relation of yours departed, or is he still lurking in yonder?" "I don't know, sir. I hope to heaven that he is gone, for he has brought nothing but trouble here. I have not heard of him since I left out food for him last, and that was 3 days ago." "Did you see him?" "No, sir, but the food was gone when I went the next day." "Then he was certainly there." "You would think, sir, unless it was the other man who took it." I sat with my coffee cup halfway to my lips and stared at Barrymore. "You know that there is another man there?" "Yes, sir, there's another man upon the moor." "Have you seen him?" "No, sir." "How do you know of him, then?" "Selden told me of him, sir, a week ago or more. He's in hiding too, but he's not a convict so far as I can make out. I don't like it, Dr. Watson. I tell you straight, sir, that I don't like it." He spoke with a sudden passion of earnestness. "Now, listen to me, Barrymore. I have no interest in this matter but that of your master. I have come here with no object except to help him. Tell me frankly, what is it that you don't like?" Barrymore hesitated for a moment as if he regretted this outburst, or found it difficult to express his own feelings in words. "It's all these going on, sir," he cried at last, waving his hand towards the rain-latticed window which faced the moor. "There's foul play somewhere, and there's black villainy brewing. To that I'll swear. Very glad I should be, sir, to see Sir Henry on his way back to London again." "But what is it that alarms you?" "Look at Sir Charles's death. That was bad enough, for all that the coroner said. Look at the noises on the moor at night. There's not a man who would cross it after sundown if he was paid for it. Look at the stranger hiding out yonder and watching and waiting. What's he waiting for? What does it mean? It means no good to anyone of the name Baskerville, and I'm very glad I shall be quit of it all on the day that Sir Henry's new servants are ready to take over the hall." "What about the stranger?" said I. "Can you tell me anything about him? What did Selden say? Did he find out where he hid or what he was doing?" "I saw him once or twice, but he is a deep one, and he gives nothing away. At first he thought that he was the police, but soon found out that he had some lay of his own. Kind of gentleman he was, as far as he could see, but he was doing he could not make out." "And where did he say that he lived?" "Among the old houses on the hillside. Some huts the still old folk used to live." "But how about his food?" "Selden found out that he has got a lad who works with him and brings him out all he needs. I dare say he goes to Coombe Trace for what he wants." "Very good, Barrymore. We may talk further on this some time." When the butler had gone, I walked over to the black window, and I looked through the blurred pane at the driving clouds and at the tossing outline of the windswept trees. It was a wild night indoors, but what must have been the stone huts on the moor? What passion of hatred can it be which leads a man to lurk in such a place at a time? And what deep and earnest purpose can he have for what calls such a trial? There in that hut upon the moor seems to lie the very centre of what problem
which has vexed me so sorely. I swear that another day shall not have passed before I shall have done all that a man can do to reach the heart of this mystery. Ugh. That was end of chapter 10. And thank you, Anonymous Gifter, for the 2 gift ups. I'm sure Firefly and EB will appreciate those. Hopefully as much as I do. And that one took half the time that chapter 9 did. Oh. Ouch. Man, I wish it would cool down. I'm tired of summer. Making my fur itch. Okay. Maybe I can get back in the rosy. Looks like I need to open my bottle of water. Ouch. I'm getting too old for this. The getting up and down, not the reading. Man, I've gone through 2 bottles of water tonight. Okay. Okay. This chapter is maybe 8 pages, so it should be good. Chapter 9 killed me. Okay. Chapter 11. The Man on the Tour. This extract from my private diary, which forms the last chapter, has brought my narrative up to the 18th of October, time which these strange events began to move swiftly towards their terrible conclusion. The incidents of the next few days are indefinitely graven upon my recollection, and I can tell them without reference to the notes made at the time. I start, then, from the day which succeeded that upon which I established 2 facts of great importance. The one that Mrs. Laurelini of Combe Tracy had written to Sir Charles Baskerville and made an appointment with him at the very place and hour that he met his death. And the other that the lurking man upon the moor was to be found among the stone huts on the hillside. These 2 facts in my possession, I felt that either my intelligence or my courage must be deficient if I could not throw some further light upon these dark places.
I had no opportunity to tell the baronet what I had learned about Mrs. Varines upon the evening before, for Dr. Mortimer remained with him at cards until it was very late. At breakfast, however, I informed him about my discovery and asked him whether he would come to accompany me to Combe Tracy. At first he was very eager to come, but on second thoughts it seemed to both of us that if I went there alone, the results might be better. The more formal we made the visit, the less information we might obtain. I left Sir Henry behind. Therefore, not without some prickings of conscience, I drove off upon my new quest. When I reached Combe Tracy, I told Perkins to put up the horses, and I made inquiries for the lady whom I had come to interrogate. I had no difficulty in finding her rooms, which were central and well appointed. A maid showed me in without ceremony, and as I entered the sitting room, a lady who was sitting before a Remington typewriter sprang up with a pleasant smile of welcome. Her face fell, however, when she saw that I was a stranger, and she sat down again and asked me the object of my visit. The first impression left by Miss Lyons was one of extreme beauty. Her eyes and hair were the same rich hazel color, and her cheeks, though considerably flecked, were flushed with the exquisite bloom of the brunette, the dainty pink which lurks at the heart of a sulphur rose. Admiration was, I repeat, the first impression, but the second was criticism. There was something subtly wrong with the face, some coarseness of expression, some hardness, perhaps, of eye, some looseness of lip which marred its perfect beauty. But these, of course, are afterthoughts. At the moment I was simply conscious that I was in the presence of a very handsome woman, and that she was asking me the reasons for my visit. I had quite understood that instant how delicate my mission was. "I have the pleasure," said I, "of knowing your father." It was a clumsy introduction, and the lady made me feel it.
"There is nothing in common between my father and me," she said. "I owe him nothing, and his friends are not mine. If it were not for the late Sir Charles Baskerville and some other kind hearts, I might have starved for all that my father cared."
"It was about the late Sir Charles Baskerville that I have come to see you." The freckles started out on the lady's face.
"What can I tell you about him?"
she asked, and her fingers played nervously over the stops of her typewriter. "You knew him, did you not?"
"I have already said that I owe a great deal to his kindness. If I am able to support myself, it is largely due to the interest which he took in my unhappy situation."
"Did you correspond with him?" The lady looked quickly up, with an angry gleam in her hazel eyes.
"What is the object of these questions?"
she asked sharply. "The object is to avoid a public scandal. It is better that I should ask them here than that matter should pass outside our control." She was silent, and her face was very pale. At last she looked up with something somewhat reckless and defiant in her manners.
"Well, I'll answer," she said. "What are your questions?"
Did you correspond with Sir Charles?
I certainly wrote him once or twice to acknowledge his delicacy and his generosity.
Have you the dates of those letters?
No.
Have you ever met him?
Yes, once or twice, when he came into Combe Terrace. He was a very retiring man, and he preferred to do good by stealth.
But if you saw him so seldom and wrote so seldom, how did he know enough about your affairs to be able to help you, as you say that he has done? She met my difficulty with the utmost readiness.
There were several gentlemen who knew of my sad history, and united to help me. One was Mr. Stapleton, a neighbor and an intimate friend of Sir Charles. He was exceedingly kind, and it was through him that Sir Charles learned about my affairs.
I already knew that Sir Charles Baskerville had made Stapleton his almoner upon several occasions, so this lady's statement bore the impress of truth upon it. Did you ever write Sir Charles asking him to meet you? I continued. Mrs. Lyons flushed with anger again.
Really, sir, this is an extraordinary question.
I am sorry, madam, but I must repeat it.
Then I answer, certainly not.
Not on the very day of Sir Charles's death. The flush had faded in an instant, and the deathly face was before me. Her dry lips could not speak the no, which I saw rather than heard. Surely your memory deceives you, said I. I could even quote a passage of your letter. It ran, Please, please, as you are a gentleman, burn this letter, and be at the gate by 10 o'clock. I thought that she had fainted, but she had recovered herself with supreme effort.
Is there no such thing as a gentleman?
She gasped. You do Sir Charles an injustice. He did burn the letter. But sometimes the letter may be legible even when burned. You acknowledge now that he wrote it?
Yes, I did write it,
she cried, pouring out her soul in a torrent of words.
I did write it. Why should I deny it? I have no reason to be ashamed of it. I wished him to help me. I believed that if I had an interview, I could gain his help. So I asked him to meet me.
But why at such an hour?
Because I had only just learned that he was going to London the next day and might be away for months. There were reasons why I could not meet there earlier.
But why a rendezvous in the garden instead to visit the house?
You think a woman could go alone at an hour to a bachelor's house?
Well, what happened when you did get there?
I never went.
Mrs. Lyons!
No, I swear it on all that I hold sacred. I never went. Something intervened to prevent me from going.
Then what was that?
That is a private matter. I cannot tell it.
You acknowledge, then, that you made an appointment with Sir Charles at the very hour and place at which he met his death, but you deny that you kept the appointment.
That is the truth.
Again and again I cross-questioned her, but I could never get past that point. "Mrs. Lyons," said I rose from this long and inconclusive interview, "you are taking a great responsibility in putting yourself in a very false position by not making it absolutely clean breast of it all that you know. If I have to call in to the aid of the police, you will find how seriously you are compromised. If your position is innocent, why did you, in the first instance, deny having written to Sir Charles upon that date?"
"Because I feared that some false conclusion might be drawn from it, and that I might find myself involved in a scandal."
"And why were you so pressing that Sir Charles should destroy your letter?"
"If you had read the letter, you would know."
"I did not say that I had read all the letter."
"You quoted some of it."
"I quoted the postscript. The letter had, as I said, been burned, and it was not all legible. I ask you once again why it was that you were so pressing that Sir Charles should destroy the letter which he received on the day of his death."
"The matter's a very private one."
"The more reason why you should avoid a public investigation."
"I will tell you then. If you have heard anything of this unhappy history, you'll know that I made a rash marriage and that I had reason to regret it."
"I have heard so much."
"My life has been one incessant persecution after my husband's and my Arthur. The law is upon his side, and every day I am faced with the possibility that he may force me to live with him. At the time that I wrote this letter to Sir Charles, I had learned that there was a prospect in my regaining my freedom if certain expenses could be met. It meant everything to me: peace of mind, happiness, self-respect, everything. I knew Sir Charles's generosity, and I thought that if he heard the story from my own lips, he would help me."
"Then how is it that you did not go?"
"Because I received help from an interval of another source."
"Why then did you not write to Sir Charles and explain this?"
"So I should have done what I had not seen his death in the paper next morning."
The woman's story hung incoherently together, and all my questions were unable to shake it. I could only check by finding if she had, indeed, instituted divorce proceedings against her husband at or about the time of the tragedy. It was unlikely that she would dare to say that she had not been to Baskerville Hall. If she had really been for a trap, would be necessary to take her there, and could not have returned to Combe Tracy until the early hours of the morning. Such an excursion would not have been kept secret. The probability was, therefore, that she was telling the truth, or at least a part of the truth. I came away baffled and disheartened. Once again I had reached the dead wall which seemed to be built across every path by which I had tried to get to the object of my mission. And yet, the more I thought of the lady's face and her manner, the more I felt that something was being held back from me. Why should she turn so pale? Why should she fight against every admission until she was forced from it? Why should she have been so reticent at the time of the tragedy? Surely the explanation of all this could be
not be as innocent as she would have me believe. For the moment, I could proceed no further in that direction, but must turn back to that other clue which was to be sought for among the stone huts at the moor. And that was the most vague direction. I realized as I drove back that I noted how hill after hill, traces of the ancient people, Barrymore's only indication had been that the stranger lived in one of these abandoned huts, and many hundreds of them are scattered throughout the length and breadth of the moor. But I had only my own experience for a guide, since it had been shown me the man himself standing at the summit of the Black Tor. That, then, should be the center of my search. From there I should explore every hut upon the moor until I lighted upon the right one. If this man were inside it, I should find out from his own lips at the point of my revolver, if necessary, who he was and why he had dragged us so long. Might slip away from us in the crowd of Regent Street, but it would puzzle him to do so upon the lonely moor. On the other hand, if I should find the hut and its tenant should not be within it, I must remain there, however long the vigil until he returned. Holmes had missed him in London. It would indeed be a triumph for me if I should run him into earth where my master had failed. Luck had been against us again and again in this inquiry, but now at last it came to my aid, and the messenger of good fortune was none other than Mr. Franklin, who was standing grey-whiskered and red-faced outside the gate of his gardens, which opened up on the high road along which I had travelled. "Good day, Dr. Watson," cried he, with an unwonted good humour. "You must really give your houses a rest, and come in to have a glass of wine and to congratulate me." My feelings towards him were far from being friendly after what I had heard of the treatment of his daughter, but I was anxious to send Perkins and the wagonette home, and the opportunity was a good one. I lighted and sent a message to Sir Henry that I should walk home over the time of dinner. Then I followed Franklin into his dining room. "It is a great day for me, sir, one of red-letter days of my life," he cried, which many cackles. "I have brought off a double event. I meant to teach them in these parts that the law is law, and there is a man here who does not fear to invoke it. I have established a right of way through the center of Middleton Park. Slap across it, sir. Within 100 yards of his own front door. What do you think of that? We will teach these magnates that they cannot ride roughshod through the rights of the commoners and confound them. And I have closed the wood around the infernally folks used to picnic. These infernal people seem to think that there is no rights of property, and that they can swarm where they like to with their papers and their bottles. Both cases decided, Dr. Watson, and both in my favor. I haven't had such a day since I had Sir John Moreland for trespass, because he shot in his own warren. How on earth did you do that? Look it up in the book, sir. It will repay reading. Franklin at Moreland, Court of Queen's Bench. It cost £200, but I got my verdict. Did it do you any good? None, sir, none. I am proud to say that I had no interest in the matter. I act entirely as a sense of public duty. I have no doubt, for example, that the Fenworthy people will burn me in effigy tonight. I told the police last time they did it they should stop these disgraceful exhibitions. The county constabulary is in a scandalous state, sir, and if it had not afforded me the protection to which I am entitled. The case of Franklin versus Regina will bring the matter to the attention of the public. I told them that they should have occasion to regret their treatment of me, and already my words have come true. How so? I asked. The old man put on a very knowing expression. Because I told them that's what they are dying to know, but nothing would induce me to help the rascals in any way. I have been casting around for some excuse by which I could get away from his gossip, but now I began to wish to hear more of it. I had seen enough of the contrary nature of the old sinner to understand that any strong sign of interest would be the surest way to stop his confidences. Some poaching case, no doubt, said I, with an indifferent manner. Ha, my boy, a very much more important matter than that. What about the convict on the moor? I started. You don't mean that you know where he is, said I. I may not know exactly where he is, but I'm quite sure that I could help the police and lay their hands on him. Has it never struck you that the way to catch one man is to find out where he got his food, and so trace it to him? You certainly seem to be getting uncomfortably close to the truth. No doubt, said I. But how do you know that he is anywhere upon the moor? I know because I've seen him with my own eyes, the messenger who takes him his food. My heart sank for Barrymore. It was a serious thing to be up in the power of this spiteful old busybody. But his next remark took a weight from my mind. You'll be surprised to hear that his food is taken to him by a child. I see him every day through the telescope upon my roof. He passes along the same path at the same hour, and to whom should he be going to except the convict? It was luck indeed, and yet I suppose pressed all appearance of interest. A child. Barrymore had said that our unknown was supplied by a boy. It was on his track, and not of his convicts. That Franklin had stumbled. If I could get his knowledge, it might save me a long and weary hunt. But incredulity and indifference were evidently my strongest cards. I should say that it is much more likely that it was the son of one of the moorland shepherds taking out his father's dinner. At least the appearance of opposition struck fire in the old autocrat. His eyes looked malignantly, and his grey whiskers bristled like those of an angry cat. Indeed, sir, said he, pointing out over the wide-stretching moor. Do you see that black tor over there yonder? Or do you see how low the hill beyond it and thorn bush upon it? It is the stoniest part of the whole moor. It is that place where a shepherd would be likely to take his station. Your suggestion, sir, is a most absurd one to me. I meekly answered that I had spoken without knowing all the facts. My submission pleased him, and led him to further confidences. You may be sure, sir, that I have very good grounds before I come to an opinion. I have seen the boy again and again in this bundle. Every day, and sometimes twice a day, I have been able... But wait a minute, Dr. Watson. Do my eyes deceive me, or is there at present something moving along that hillside? It was several miles off, but I could distantly see a small dark dot against the dull gray and green. Come, sir, come, cried Franklin, rushing downstairs.
Upstairs. You'll see it with your own eyes and judge for yourself. The telescope, a formidable instrument mounted upon a tripod, stood upon the flat leads of the house. Franklin clapped his eye to it and gave a cry of satisfaction. "Quick, Dr. Watson, quick, before he passes over the hill." There he was, sure enough, a small urchin with a little bundle upon his shoulder, toiling slowly up the hill. When he reached the crest, I saw a ragged, uncouth figure outlined for an instant against the cold blue sky. He looked around him with a furtive and stealthy air, as one who dreads pursuit. Then he vanished over the hill. "Well, am I right?" Certainly, there's a boy who seems to have some secret errand. And what is that errand is even a country constable could guess. But not one word shall they have from me. I bind you to secrecy also, Dr. Watson. Not a word. You understand? Just as you wish. They have all treated me shamefully, shamefully. When the facts come out in Franklin and Regina, I venture to think that a thrill of indignation will run through the country. Nothing would induce me to help the police in any way. For all they cared, it might have been me instead of my effigy, which these rascals burned at stake. Surely you're not going. You will help me to empty the decanter in honor of this great occasion. But I resisted all his solicitations and succeeded in dissuading him from his announced intention of walking home with me. I kept to the road as long as his eye was on me, and then I struck off across the moor and made for the stony hill which we had overseen the boy. Everything was working in my favor, and I swore that it should not be through the lack of energy or perseverance that I should miss the chance which fortune had thrown my way. The sun was already sinking when I reached the summit of the hill, and the long slopes beneath me were all golden green on one side and greyish shadow on the other. A haze lay low upon the farthest skyline, out of which jutted the fantastic shapes of Belver and Vixentor. Over the wide expanse there was no sound and no movement. One great grey bird, a gull, a curlew, soared aloft in the blue heaven. He and I seemed to be the only living things between this huge arch of the sky and the desert beneath it. The barren scene, the sense of loneliness, and the mystery and urgency of my task all struck a chill to my heart. The boy was nowhere to be seen, but down beneath me, in the cleft of the hills, there was a circle of some of the old stone huts, and in the middle of them was one which had retained a sufficient roof to act as a screen against the weather. My heart leaped within me, and I saw it. The man must be in the burrow where the stranger lurked. At last my foot was on the threshold of his hiding place. His secret was within my grasp. As I approached the hut, walking as warily as Stapleton would do when he was poised for the net, he drew near the settled butterfly. I satisfied myself that the place was indeed being used as a habitation. A vague passageway among the boulders led to the dilapidated opening which served as a door. All was silent within. The unknown might be lurking there, or he might be prowling on the moor. My nerves tingled with a sense of adventure. Throwing aside my cigarettes, I closed my hand upon the butt of my revolver, and walking swiftly up to the door, I looked in. The place was empty. There were ample signs that I had not come upon a false scent. This was certainly where the man lived. Some blankets rolled in a waterproof lay upon the very stone slab which Neolithic man had once slumbered. The ashes of a fire were heaped in a rude grate. Beside it lay some cooking utensils and a bucket half full of water. A litter of empty tins showed the place where he had occupied some time, and I saw as my eyes became accustomed to the checkered light, a pannikin and a half-full bottle of spirits standing in the corner. In the middle of the hut, a flat stone served its purpose of a table, and upon this stood a small cloth bundle, the same, no doubt, from the shoulder of the boy. It contained a loaf of bread, a tinned tongue, and 2 tins of preserved peaches. I set it down again, after having examined it. My heart leaped to see that beneath it there lay a sheet of paper with writing upon it. I raised it, and this is what I read, roughly scrawled in pencil. Dr. Watson has gone to Combe Tracy. For a minute I stood there with the paper in my hands, thinking out the meaning of this curt message. It was I, then, and not Sir Henry, who was being dogged by the secret man. He had not followed me himself, but had sent an agent, the boy perhaps, upon my track. And this was his report. Possibly I had taken no steps since I had been upon the moor which had not been observed and repeated. Always there was this feeling of an unseen force, a fine net drawn around us with infinite skill and delicacy, holding us so lightly that it was only at some supreme moment that one realized that one indeed entangled in its meshes. If there was one report, there might be others, so I looked around the hut in search of them. There was no trace, however, of anything of the kind, nor could I discover any sign which might indicate that the character or intentions of a man who lived in this singular place, save that he might be of Spartan habits, and cared little for the comforts of life. When I thought of the heavy rains and looked at the gaping roof, I understood how strong and immutable must be the purpose which had kept him in that inhospitable abode. Was he our malignant enemy, or was he by chance our guardian angel? I swore that I could not leave the hut until I knew. Outside the sun was sinking low, and west was blazing with scarlet and gold. His reflection was shot back in ruddy patches by distant pools, which he lay in mid the Grimpen mire. There were 2 towers of Baskerville Hall, and there was a distant blur of smoke which marked the village of Grimpen. Between the 2, behind the hill, was the house of the Stapletons. All was sweet and mellow and peaceful in the golden evening light, and yet as I looked at them, my soul shared none of the peace of the nature, but quivered at the vagueness and the terror of that interview which might in the very instant be bringing near. With tingling nerves but a fixed purpose, I sat in the dark recess of the hut, and waited with somber patience for the coming of its tenant. At last I heard them. Far away came a sharp clink of boots striking upon stone. Then another, and yet another, coming nearer and nearer. I shrank back into the darkest corner and cocked the pistol in my pocket, determined not to discover myself until I had the opportunity of seeing something of the stranger. There was a long pause which showed that he had stopped. Then once more the footsteps approached, and a shadow fell across the opening of the hutch. "It was a lovely evening, my dear Watson," said a well-known voice. "I really think that you should be more comfortable outside than in." Okay, I'm going to stop there for the night. Oh, I'm tired. So, if you've listened to me telling the story long enough, you hopefully recognize the voice that I was using. Though it was a bit of a stretch for me to reach it after so much Watson. Man, only 3 chapters out, but that first chapter was almost 2 anyway. Again, I do apologize for the people who may or may not have gotten stuck behind ads. I would, suggest subscribing, but I'm not that kind. You can always do Twitch Turbo, which is actually the price of having 2 subscriptions, but you get ads canceled everywhere, supposedly. But I do thank the anonymous gifter for the anonymous subscriptions. But now that the story is... I gotta see how many more chapters I have left. Because that was chapter 11 we finished tonight. The last page of Hound of the Baskervilles is 293. And when we come back to this, we will be starting on 264. I've got 29 pages left, some of which have pictures. So it'll be one more stream, hopefully. And then I get to go back to reading The Return of Sherlock Holmes, which is in this book, but I started Hound of the Baskervilles before I got a copy of this book, so. So if anyone out there would like to suggest a raid, I am open to it. Let's see who's on. We can go ahead and go into another reading. We can go right folklore. Is she reading? I think she's reading the Time Machine. Yeah, she's reading the Time Machine. If you want to read that, we can read her. We could raid friends and go get Dusk. Who else is on? Yeah, our friend's on. Fred raided me last time. I guess we could do it. Graveyard Keeper. What is Graveyard Keeper? I'm gonna go look into the stream and see what's going on. Okay. I guess it's just keeping track of a graveyard. Yeah, let's go ahead and raid Fred. There we go. And I do have my raid messages if you want to use them. I've got my follower message, my subscriber message. Feel free to use whichever one you want. But yeah, let's go raid Fred. And I had to get rid of my closing credit music because YouTube kept yelling copyright on me. I mean, it said I could use it on the website I got it, but whatever. I'll see you all tomorrow night for Fairy Tales. And maybe some other streams over the weekend I haven't figured out yet, so. Oh, have a good night, everyone, or whichever time zone you may exist in. See you later. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. And we're forging.